Okay, so we're starting now what we hope is the final installment of the 13 Principles of Faith. The first 5 we went through on the previous weeks. We're now going to pick up, we're going to focus mainly this time on Nevuah, the idea of prophecy, which is something which the Rambam writes a lot about. I think I'm right, don't quote me on this, but I think I'm right in saying that it's the topic that he spends the most time on throughout his major works.
Which?
Prophecy. The introduction to the Mishnah, he goes through a lot of detail. Introduction to Chelek, which is also part of the Parish Mishnah. More in the book, he's got like 15-20 chapters dedicated just to prophecy. It's something which he's very, very he's trying to work out how it's something. It's for him, it's something who's coming along from a more rationalist perspective, trying to explain how it works, how information and communication comes from the divine sphere. It's something that it was obviously one of his pet topics.
It's very interesting. I'm not sure if we're going to discuss it now, but I remember actually one of your own posts you wrote about angels, angels appearing in human form, like how there's a big argument between the Rambam and the Ramban, Nachmanides, about whether it's possible for something that's supposedly purely a spiritual entity to come to appear in a physical form, like in our physical world. Well, which is something that the Rambam, Maimonides, seems to oppose. He's like, no, that's not possible.
It could be as linked to this discussion, because the Rambam, the two worlds are very far. Everything is a binary existence. There's the spiritual world and the physical world. There's nothing in between. So something which is purely spiritual, an angel, how to appear in our world. It must be a prophecy. It must be a nevuah, a vision. So maybe it's the same sort of thing. That how can a message come from the spiritual world into the physical world? It's something which requires a lot of explanation.
Right.
Whereas somewhere like the Ramban or more Kabbalistic sorts, but there are sort of all different ranges of different worlds, and it's almost like a conveyor belt of moving from one to the other.
Right.
So they're kind of less bothered by it. They say, the communication comes, it's miraculous, we understand it, but the idea of it doesn't bother them so much. So I don't think they go into so much detail about how prophecy works.
I think
the Rambam, he feels the need to explain it because definitely people who are around him struggle with this concept.
I think the clearest proof that it is possible, but maybe that's an exception to the rule, but like the clearest proof to me that it's possible that you can mix the world is us, ourselves, humans, because we have a physical body and a spirit and a shaman, and they're connected, combined. Like one cannot live without.
That's kind of the way he goes. He says that on the Shama is a Tzem Elokim. It's there, it can pick up the radar of the divine broadcast, so to speak. And when the Tzem Elokim, when the Neshama, when the mind is properly trained and connected, it picks up the Chachma and the Midot are in sync, so they're not corrupting the intellect. When everything's in sync properly, then we are some sort of a vessel to be able to pick up the divine broadcasting communication.
Right.
But yeah, let's see. So Yesod Hashishi Nevuah. People have to know. So it's interesting. He doesn't. Some of the other ones he says Shanamin, you have to believe. Here he says Shayeda, and that person has to know. I don't know exactly why he uses one phrase. Also, this is translated from the Arabic, so it's not always clear. We don't always pick up the nuances. Shazah min ha'adam, the human species. Yimatzeh bahem ba'alei tzavayim b'midos mu'ulos v'zachus mu'od shlomus gedola. So it's a combination. In order to be a prophet, it seems that not everyone is born to be a prophet. You have to have a combination of the natural tendencies, and there's a lot of training that goes along with that. So you have to have the mental faculties, the imagination, your midot. You have to be able to train in sync, and you have to have purified yourself. So it's again, more in the book, and he goes through this in a lot more detail exactly how each of these stages works. There's a combination of intellectual, of training your midot not to be. Because the midot can interrupt the intellect from working properly. They can divert the intellect into believing whatever it wants to believe. If the worse a person's midot is, however clever they are, their mind will just serve their bad qualities and find them excuses to what they want and fine. Until they can receive from the Surah Seichel refers to the Malachim, as we'll see. We'll show from Mishnah Torah. So the human intellect is able to cleave to receive communication from what's called, this is the philosophical term, the active intellect. It's some sort of intermediary malach intellect, as we'll see. And that malach intellect in the Shamayim can then emanate information and communications to the human mind. These people who train themselves in this way are prophets, and this is how prophecy works. Again, this is an abridgment of 15 chapters of Moreh Nevuchim. He's just giving this is written for Parish Mishnah, it's written for everyone, so he's not going to go into all the details. And he just says here there's a lot more to know about it. The proper explanation of this yesod is very, very lengthy, and we're not going to go and bring proofs for everything here. It would take hundreds of pages. We're not going to go into it. I'm just giving over derech sipor, just very brief telling over. We cry Torah mi'idim on the verse Nevim Haba. I don't need to bring a proof from the Torah for this, like with some of the others, because it's all over the Torah. So the idea again seems to be that the human mind does not connect directly to God. The divine mind, if we call it a mind, God and the human mind are so distant, so far apart, that there can't be any direct connection there. I think he writes in both Mishnah Torah and the Moreh Nevuchim how we don't even understand what God's knowledge means, how God knows things. He doesn't know things the way we know things. He knows himself, and if we know, we just cannot fathom what God's form of knowledge, what his mind is, and therefore when the human is going to receive some sort of communication, unless it's Moshe rabeinu, as we'll see afterwards, that's its own discussion, it's always via a malach. He says here in the second chapter of Mishnah Torah, in Yesod Torah 2:7, he brings the 10 different levels of malach in there, from the chayos ofanim all the way down, and the lowest one is called ishim. And this level called ishim is called ishim because it's the one which is the lowest level of malach, which is then able to communicate with people. It's close enough that that we can get some kind of connection, and by being misarev, so the seventh chapter, the beginning of the seventh chapter of the Yesod Torah, that by being misarev adas with ishim, a person who's perfected their mind their mind can associate with this malach called ishim. It can start picking up. It can yafeka b'shachay, turns into a different sort of person. He's able to pick up some sort of broadcasting communication. And that's only via a malach, as we'll see. He talks about in the next yesod.
Where do we see that these two intellects that he brings here, the sechel, like the tzura sechel, and I think the sechel.
So sechel apile is the philosophical term which the philosophers use for some sort of store of information in the sky. Ishim is the term used by Chazal for a level of the malach, which is closest to and can connect to people. And the Rambam is basically here identifying that these are the same. What the philosophers call the store of information in the sky, and what Chazal call Ishim, is more or less the same. The difference is that a malach is something which is an agent of God. So God has created it for a certain purpose in order to communicate, and when it communicates with people, it's doing the will of God. Whereas for the philosophers, it's just this second information in the sky. It's not really divine will. There's a difference there between Aristotle and the Rambam.
But where does he make this connection in the text?
In the text of what? Sorry.
What we're learning now. Like, where does he make this connection between this active intellect, or the form of intellect, and these angels?
I'm just showing the correlation between in the Parish Mishnah. He says Yidvak oisa seichel anoishi b'seichel hapoel. So he just uses the term seichel hapoel, active intellect. But if you take a look at, first of all, the footnote here in the Shilat says Hu malach ha'mamanah seichel. But then if you look at the way he describes it in Mishnah Torah, he says pretty much exactly the same thing, but he uses the term malach, ishim, rather than seichel hapoel. So he's describing the same process. One is with his philosopher's hat on, and one is with his rabbi's hat on.
Right.
And he's saying that it's really the same thing. What the philosophers call active intellect, which is this store of information in the sky, Chazal call ishim. And again, the big difference is, he points out in Moreh Nevuchim, that the big difference between Chazal and Rambam and Judaism and Aristotle is Aristotle believes that all of this just happened to be the way it is. Right. Whereas for Chazal and the Rambam, it's called the malach, and malach has a very important connotation. It's a messenger. It's doing God's will. Meaning when the malach communicates with a human being, it's not just this sort of natural process that the person's developed their mind. They can plug into some sort of pool of information in the sky. The way Aristotle and the philosophers look at it, it's a malach. It's doing God's will. And God is directing through hashkocha the malach to communicate certain things to it. But the actual way it works is is a similar structure. That's what
and the form of intellect, like you said, the form of that he says first like there's like two steps, like that he first.
Right, the first step, this is because the Rambam over, not all the Rishonim agree, according to the Rambam, you can only receive prophecy if you've prepared yourself to be on a certain level for it. You have to, he goes through it in more detail in his other works, you have to have perfected your intellect, your imagination, your midot, you've got a whole bunch of different things, and you have to be able to meditate in a certain way, and it's a certain level of preparations, and he brings I think from Nach. There were schools called B'nai Nevi'im.
Right. You
find them sometimes that the B'nai Nevi'im, and these were people who were basically almost like semi-set aside for the rest of the society, and they were doing music, and they were meditating, and they were perfecting their midot, and they were studying Chokhmah in order to get to the level where they'll be able to receive Nevuah. So he's saying that it's not something which is an automatic process. You have to be on a level to receive a Nevuah.
Right, but what he says that he calls like to receive the form of intellect? Like the tzurata.
Yeah, then what a human has is a tzelem Elokim, which is a tzelem Elokim b'koach, the way he describes it in the Mara, and by training it becomes b'poal, it becomes active, and it's able to connect to the malach, which is broadcasting communications.
But but I mean, like he brings here two things. He says like you have to prepare yourself, then you until you become fit to receive the Tzurat.
After that, then it's able to connect to Sechel HaPoel.
What is then this Tzurat HaSechel?
Tzurat HaSechel is, I think, his own mind, meaning he has the potential to be a Sechel, but it only receives its Surah, each correct piece of information and correct midah and correct everything he does, places a Surah on his mind. He's using philosophical terms, he goes into more in the Mora, but the mind is a mind in potential, and by training it, it receives a tzura. For example, just like a piece of wood is part of a tree, it's got the chomer, it's the wood.
Yeah.
By hitting it and cutting it and smoothing it, it becomes a tzura of a table. It was always a table in potential.
Right.
The chomer was there, the basic material was there, but until the carpenter came and cut it and scraped it and did everything it needed to, it wasn't yet a table. It didn't have the tzura of a table. So too, we're created with a potential. Anashama is a almost bakar, and by training it and in all the different ways, both through midas and chachma and everything like that, we give it the tzurat haseichel. And that Tzurat HaSeichel is then able to receive the broadcasts from above, from the Malach Ishim and that's how Nevuah.
Okay.
That's how a simple Nevuah works, which is the Nevuah of everyone apart from Moshe Rabbeinu.
Clear.
That's Yesod HaShishi. Yesod HaShavi, it gets into the complication that Moshe Rabbeinu had a unique form of Nevuah. Let's go through word for word here. It's started. Shanamin Kihavim. We have one of the principles of faith is to believe that Moshe had the ultimate level of nevuah. No one before or after would ever have that level of nevuah. He was nivcha mikol amin, and the important point is his level reached min ha'inoshos of humanity. This is an important phrase here. He essentially became an angel. Moshe Rabbeinu, unlike other Nevi'im who could train their mind, and at certain points their mind could sort of reach up and be misarev malach ishim. Their mind could at certain points combine with or attach itself to this malach ishim and therefore receive a communication and then come back down again. Moshe Rabbeinu says nichlal b'malach malachim. He was actually basically a living malach, which is why we're going to see he didn't require a malach to receive nevuah, because he was basically already on that level of malach ishim or whatever it was.
That's I think interesting. That where was it? I forgot which place. It was a pasuk where we talk about where it talks about that the Yetziat Mitzrayim, and where it says that no, it says like Hashem sent them an angel ahead of us, and I think Rashi explains that it's referring to Moshe Rabbeinu.
Oh, interesting.
Somewhere.
That's in the desert? That's in...
Yeah, or somewhere. I'm not sure where this pasuk is, but I remember seeing like that Rashi would say like this angel is really referring to Moshe Rabbeinu, because we know that the Jews in the end were not led by an angel. Hashem himself went when they brought him, like not the Exodus, it's not the actual Yetziat Mitzrayim, but more like through the desert.
Right, after the Chet Egel, there was
Right.
the Malach who led them, and it's
Hashem wanted to send an actual angel instead of going in front of
right. And Moshe
himself.
kind of refused. He said,
Right, he said like, no, he decided that
Al Talenim is there.
Right.
We're not going to be moved if you're not.
But then later it says like Hashem sent an angel to guide him to the chosen land, and then Rashi says like, since obviously that Hashem himself was the one who went ahead, so it must mean that he was referring to Moshe.
Oh, is that in Devarim?
Could be that's in Devarim. Could be.
There's a little discussion about that. Yeah.
So it's interesting. It connects to what he says here that he's.
So unlike other Nevi'im who trained themselves and were great people, so they could connect to Malachim and receive some sort of communication, Moshe Rabbeinu was Nichla b'Malat Malachim.
So wait a minute, so all Nebuah comes through Malachim?
Right, that's the Rambam's principle. Because our mind is not able, it's so distant and far away from God, it's not able to receive a direct communication. It can only get he's going to bring Pesukim for it soon. It can only get some sort of indirect vision, communication, a riddle. Whereas Moshe Rabbeinu, because he essentially was a malach living in this world, he was able to receive. Again, we don't know exactly how it was in the Moreh Nevuchim. He still considered it some sort of a miracle, not something which we really understand and relate to. But Moshe Rabbeinu was basically out of this world. He was receiving something on such a direct level from God. He was basically on the level of a malach.
But
So sorry, in the Rambam's language, then he was on the level of Malachim.
Yeah, nichlal b'malat hamalachim. He was included on the level of a malach, meaning his perception and way of receiving the divine broadcasts was like that of a malach rather than that of a human who receives prophecy. And no one before or after would ever be on that level. L'kom Yisrael k'moshe oz, and all of that.
But does he then explain maybe in the Moreh Nevuchim or in other places explain why the Torah still, whenever it talks about any prophecy, it always talks about Hashem speaking to someone. It never says like the angel spoke to the person.
So yeah, we're going to get to these. He's going to bring Pesukim for this.
Okay.
So lo nishar. So because Moshe was on the level of Malach, lo nishar masach. There was no screen remaining. So he talks in the Shemona Parokim, his introduction to Pirkei Avos, about how even within the prophets there are different levels of prophecy, and each, at the greater extent, each Navi had his midot in sync and properly trained, and had his chokhmah. To the extent that there was something missing, it would be like a screen separating them from the vision, and they would get in their picture. Would be more and more blurry. So Moshe didn't have any screen left at all. There was nothing physical. He had no physicality. He was a great anav. He had nothing in his personality that was holding him back. There was no chisaron. He had no imagination to interfere with the intellectual communication. So he goes through that there was nothing there at all. Therefore, he was therefore able to achieve a direct communication, and he goes on to explain this. So this is why Moshe is he is it's only Moshe is described as Pe'el Pe'el Davavai. I can speak to him directly, face to face. So Rambam understands from that Moshe is Pe'el Pe'el. Everyone else, all other malachim, were through the intermediary of a malach, meaning not Pe'el Pe'el, not direct, but the communication which was received on their senses. And we'll explain that more in a minute.
Right? In other words, when God speaks to Aaron the Kohen, that's also through a malach.
Right. It seems to be to the extent that I think it could be the Gurari, the Maharal. It says even when it says, one second, how does it go? There's a lashon of Rashi. I think it's the beginning of Matos, where it says, Hashem says to Moshe, Zeh hadavar, this thing.
Yes.
And Rashi says on that, I assume he's quoting a medrash, but I don't know, he says, Moshe was different to all other prophets, he prophesied Zeh hadavar, because it was precise. All other prophets were Ko'amar. He said something like this, it's an approximation. I received some kind of approximation of God's will, and I have to try and interpret it, I have to try and understand it. But there's one occasion, I think, where Aaron also has Zeh hadavar, and the Maharal, I think, explains that he only received that via Moshe. It says something like Hashem says to Moshe and Aaron saying Zeh hadavar, and the Maharal says we have to explain this as being that Moshe got it and related it to Aaron. because only Moshe had that level of direct prophecy. I'll try and find it afterwards if you want. And all of that pasuk which is very crucial. He's going to go into this pasuk later, so I won't quote it now. So he says there's a lot more to discuss here, but I'm just giving a general outline. So in order to explain exactly how prophecy works and the difference of Moshe's prophecy, I need to explain to you all about the mitziut of malachim and the different levels of them, and basically getting into esoteric, kabbalistic, shiur brings here, which is one of the works I think which is interpreted a lot in some parts of the Zohar. It's saying in order to understand the exact level of Moshe's prophecy and the difference between that and other prophecies, you need a lot of background in Sod, and therefore I'm not going to go into this now. But he said he hopes to write 3 different books called the Sefer Perish Drashos, Sefer Nevuah, and further a book which further goes into these Sodas. He never actually managed any of them, but I think the Sefer Nevuah might have turned into the Moreh Nevuchim. Anyway, I'm going to return to the main intention of this 7th principle. So there are 4 essential differences, practical differences, between the Nevuah of Moshe Rabbeinu and that of the other prophets. Arishon, the first. As we mentioned, all other prophets didn't get a direct communication. Only Moshe, only with Moshe, when Hashem is telling Miriam and Aaron that Moshe is not like them and his prophecy is different to them, he says, well, him I speak to peh. By implication, all other prophets I don't speak to peh. It's some kind of general communication which they can pick up. Inyan Hasheni, second difference. Ki kol navi lo tova nevuah elo kishu yashen. Other prophets can only receive prophecy in some sort of sleep or trance or meditative state. Prophets got things through some sort of dream, or some kind of during the day, not while they're sleeping, but there's some sort of trance falls over them. They're sort of turned off from their normal way of acting.
Is that what refers to when we read about Avraham Avinu? Is it like a tardema, like some sort of like a deep kind of sleep? Something?
Interesting, right? That's a particular sleep, the Brisbane of Asarim. Right. So it could be relevant. In the Mori goes through, I think, 13 different levels of prophecy and types of prophecy. Okay, wow. And I think it says Avraham Avinu was like the highest one below Moshe Rabbeinu, because it was like an interactive prophecy where he was actually interacting with people and things, and he wasn't just sort of passively receiving some sort of message he had to decode, but he was interacting with the heavenly bodies and angels and things. So he says Avraham Avinu. So Avraham understands that his interaction with the Malachim at the beginning of Vayera, thinking about Sodom, and that was an interactive. Bilam, he doesn't go into so much. He just says that Bilam had a more righteous time where he was a prophet, but he doesn't really explain or go into so much. It's a lot to talk about there. Whereas Moshe Rabbeinu, Yovei Elav Adibur Bayom, who Omed Ben Shnei Kuruvim. Moshe, by contrast, he'd be walking around, going through his normal day-to-day business, and he would get a prophecy while he's standing there, Ben Shnei Kuruvim. So I go there and I'll talk to you. Another pasuk. So this is the whole pasuk where he's telling Miriam and Aaron that Moshe's nevuah is different to the ones that they receive, because they were trying to say, well, why can't Moshe behave like us? We're also prophets. So Hashem's explaining to him, no, it's different. It's an entirely different form of prophecy. You're prophets. Well, b'mara elav esvadah. I'll make myself known to you. You'll get some sort of vision. You'll pick up some kind of communication, a vision that you have to decode. Or with a dream, I'll speak to you. Like Abdi Moshe. Moshe is completely different. Speak to him regularly, not in a dream, not in a vision. He gets to the extent that we can say, as we're going to see later, that Moshe's perception of God was so precise and clear that he could write down word for word the Ratzon Hashem in the Torah. Other prophets didn't get that. It was Koyam Hashem. They got an approximation of God's will, and which king was it? Yeshio had this, was aware of this, and the Gemara in Megillah talks about how he had a sense that something bad was going to happen. I think he found the scroll with the Torah on it, and he wanted to go to ask a Navi for advice. So the Gemara says he dafka went to the prophetess Hulda, who was presumed to be, she was a woman, she had more Rahmana, something like that, and he avoided going to Yirmiyah, because Yirmiyah had a bit of a reputation as being like a harsh talker and saying scary things. And the Gemara, we see from there that the prophecy filters through the personality of the prophet. There's a Kama Hashem, they get some sort of vision, some sort of idea, and they have to interpret it. To the extent that how they interpret it can actually affect the prophecy. So Yeshua wanted to go to who he thought was going to be a more compassionate prophet to sort of take the edge off the prophecy. Whereas Moshe Rabbeinu, no, there's no ambiguity. If the pasuk says, these words, that's exactly the words which Hashem wanted Moshe to write down. No, all other nevuahs, it's a koyam Hashem.
Is it also why people say that when you read the rest of Nach, you shouldn't take everything at face value, because the nevuah maybe was not meant to be like that, meaning that it shouldn't be taken literally. Like sometimes it says a war is coming, this is going to happen, especially about things that happens in the time of Mashiach. And it's like you shouldn't take it literally because anyway the Nuva was never brought.
So I don't think the reason for that is because it's a different Navi. I think there are different rules that some sort of prophecies are contingent upon other things. Say a negative prophecy, we say, could always be forgiven. Right. There's some. I think there's a Gemara in Sanhedrin at Chelek actually, where the Gemara asks. It brings two different prophecies from Nach about what's going to happen at the time of Mashiach, and Rabbi Yochanan, Yerushalmi, answers, well, these are two different options. One is if we're Zocheh, it'll happen this way, and if we're not Zocheh, it'll happen the other way. So it's not necessarily because it wasn't Moshe Rabbeinu, it's because the prophecies were not necessarily intended to be absolute and binding, whereas other prophecies perhaps could have been. So, yeah. So Inyan Shlishi, the third difference between Moshe's prophecy and other prophecies, Ki hanavi shetzava elav hanevuah apapishi b'mara v'alidei malach. So the prophet, the regular prophet, has to be sleeping, and his body goes into lockdown always. He gets some sort of great fear and trembling overcoming him, because he has to almost have his imagination, his senses, his personal input has to be turned off, so to speak, in order to get the communication onto his imagination. He's picking up through his imagination, his intellect, some sort of divine communication. There can't be any interference from his personality. So that has to be like a stun gun almost put on him, so that nothing comes in and interferes with the communication. Whereas Moshe Rabbeinu doesn't have to have that because he's got no interference coming, because he's been mevatel his personality completely to Hashem, and there's no interference coming there. We say also in Matan Torah we have this idea that there was some kind of prophecy that everyone was able to even if it's a third party prophecy, that everyone was able to participate in, and there was a great mara. Again, the people couldn't take it, they couldn't handle it, their bodies they were trembling, and I think Chazal even say that they died and they brought back to life again. Getting a prophecy when you're not cut out for it, when you're not ready for it, even when you are ready for it, is a frightening experience. It's like this blast of great, again, I can't even describe it. So but it's something very scary, and he brings a bunch of psukim which talk about how the prophet's bodies were basically thrown into fear. He said, "Nirdam apanai," I was thrown onto my face. Daniel is saying when Gabriel spoke to him in a vision, "Nish arbi koach," I had my strength was taken away from me, because he had to be stunned in order to receive this message. Whereas Moshe Rabbeinu, dirashem aponim kashay daber ishoreyehu, it was like a conversation about something with someone else, because Moshe was so tuned in as some kind of malach, he didn't have anything which had to be stunned, so to speak, and suspended.
Maybe he's going to get to it at some point, but I was wondering, like here in the example with Daniel, and I think there's other areas as well, the pasuk explicitly mentions that it's an angel that spoke to him, And you say that and he writes here that with every prophet except for Moshe Rabbeinu, it was actually an angel. So why does the Torah sometimes says Hashem spoke to this person, and sometimes it says an angel spoke? Or
it's a good question. I'm pretty sure he deals with it in the Morah when he goes through different levels of prophecy and says, how do you know which level's which? Sometimes the person is aware that it's like a malach actually talking directly to him, so you get to clear information. Other times it's only indirect through some sort of vision which the malach sends to him. I think he goes through, this is like a very, very brief summary of 15, 20 chapters over there. But yeah, it's definitely a relevant question. Yeah. 1 second. Yeah, almost like Zeh, see more in Book 137. So yeah, he's got the footnotes here to different places in those chapters.
Okay.
That's 3 differences. The 4th difference between Moshe's level and the other levels, all other prophets, they could train, they could daven, they could do all the preparations, but they could not receive nevuah whenever they wanted to. It was a matter of whenever Hashem decided there was a communication for them, they would or would not be granted something. And sometimes a lot could wait for years to be able to be spoken to.
And it says, let's go ask.
Whereas Moshe says, was it Imdor Eshma? Where's it gone here? Yeah, no, it's a different one. Right, Moshe rabeinu lava shalom b'chol eis shiur tzeh. Imdu ve'eshma ma'yitzav Hashem lachem. I think this is around the Pesach Sheni. They come and say to him, well, why are we going to miss out? Because with Tamei we're doing a mitzvah. Moshe says, a good point, then we go and check with God. So he has the divine hotline there at any minute. He can just dial up. And whereas because he was always on that level, his level didn't fluctuate, it seems to be. Whereas other Nevi'im, their level fluctuated, and then there wasn't always a need to communicate with them. Another passage he brings, this is a Ma'amar Chazal from, I don't know where this is. Where is this quoted? Aaron b'val yavoy ve'ein Moshe b'val yavoy. It's in the Sifra, in the Sifra Nachrei Mos. So Hashem says to tell Aaron, you can't come whenever you want into the Kodesh Kodshim to talk to me, just on Yom Kippur at the right time. And whereas the Sifra, the Midrash makes a diuk, you tell Aaron, but you come in whenever you want, come and talk to me, because your level is constantly there. You don't need all these preparations and everything like that.
So you're saying that when the Kohen Gadol would go into the Kodesh Kodashim Yom Kippur, like during the Avodah, that he would receive a form of prophecy there?
It could well be, I don't know.
Or reach a level that's close to that.
There's definitely a lot of connections there between the Beis HaMikdash and the Merkava and the angels and the prophecy, but again, there's a lot of dots to be to be connected. But yeah, I think there's definitely something going on there. I think it's Sechas Brachas, where one of the Kohen Gadol, I think it's made into a song actually. Rabbi Shmuel, Kohen Gadol, went in with the Kataras and Yom Kippur, and he had this whole vision of Katriel, I think it is. So again, that's a connection again. The Kohen Gadol going in, it's not just he's going in to put some incense down and walking out again. There's some sort of prophetic, or at least Ruach HaKodesh. There's something more going on there. Exactly what it is, I don't know. I think it's again the whole setup of the Beis HaMikdash is. They say the Ma'aser Merkava is connected. If you look at the Losha, when Hashem's giving Shlomo Melech the instructions of how to build the Beis HaMikdash, there's the Merkava where the water goes. There's the Ofanim. The lot of words there which are used, which sort of cross-reference with the Ma'aser Merkava of Yecheskel. So there's an idea that the setup in the Beis HaMikdash was naturally it was representing something Ma'aser Merkava, without being able to know and all these things and explain it. There's definitely something going on there.
It should also, I think, not come as a surprise then that many Nevi'im were in fact Kohanim also.
Right. And I think is there some sort, is it just Tefillah, or is also Nevuah, which is connected to the base of the Shar HaShamayim, right? Where Yaakov Avinu, the ladder, the Malachim going up and down. There's Shar HaShamayim. There's definitely. I'm sure there's stuff written on this. It's fine. Yisod HaShemini. So this is the last main one we're going to do, and the rest I think we've pretty much dealt with all earlier in this series. It's an important one. Here's Torah min HaShamayim. We've got to believe. Shenami, we've got to believe. Rather than know. It's interesting as well. He called Torah as a mitzvah b'deinu atza. He anasun al yedei Moshe rabeinu alav shalom. she kulam epia gvura. All the Torah that we have now in our hands was given by Hashem through the agency of Moshe Rabbeinu. Kulam epia gvura. So this is a very strong presentation. If you remember, we were looking the last couple of weeks, we were comparing the way things are presented in Hilchos Teshuvah, the definition of heresy we have there with the definitions that we have in these 13 principles, and so go back to it here because there is a bit of a difference here. Teshuvah, Perek 3. Right, so much in the Klal that we've had. So these aren't substantial differences. There we go. So if you say that the Torah isn't from Hashem, even a single word, even a single pasuk, then you're a kofer, you're a denier, and you have no olam haba. So this is a little bit of a difference. Here he's saying the whole Torah we have in our hands now was given to us by Moshe Rabbeinu. Right? That's what he's saying in his own presentation of it. In his psak in Mishnah Torah, he's saying, the whole Torah came to us from Hashem. He's not saying from Moshe Rabbeinu. And he's saying Moshe Rabbeinu didn't make anything up by himself. He's not saying that it's a principle of faith that the entire Torah we have now came to us from Moshe. Which is interesting because if we look, there's a machlokes in Baba Basra about the final 8 or 10 psukim in the Torah, which there are opinions in the Gemara didn't come from Moshe Rabbeinu. It came from Yeshua, who is a prophet. There are other discussions that I don't get to all now. There are right. Whereas one the other Tana says that Moshe Rabbeinu did write it through prophecy, and it was only which is how Rambam paskins. So he paskins that the whole Torah we have in our hands came from Moshe Rabbeinu, and when he's writing his own parish based on his own understanding in his 13 principles, that's the way he presents it. Every single word we have now comes from Moshe Rabbeinu, but he's not going to paskin you're a heretic going against basically saying a Tana is a heretic in Mishnah Torah, which is the legal definition of which is a subtle difference there.
I saw somewhere an explanation, but maybe it's like a way to coincide, to reconcile these two different opinions. And they said that Moshe wrote, maybe I think in tears, like he wrote these last psukim as well, just not in the correct order. The letters were like all jumbled, and then Yeshua arranged them in a way that makes sense.
Even the one that says Yeshua wrote it, he was writing it based on. Interesting.
Yeah, like he didn't know what he was writing. Basically, he was writing like in not in the way that we have it right now. And then just Joshua rearranged them, if I remember correctly.
Okay, it's not the plain meaning there, but
right.
It's definitely bring it closer.
Which was sort of like reconcile. They basically both of them wrote it together, or they both had part in it.
There's also a big difference. If, for example, the difference between these two texts, if someone comes along and there are people making claims about Ibn Ezra and various other, again, I'm not going to go into all these claims now. There are plenty of books that write about it. If someone comes along and says a certain posuk was added in later, on a day nevuah, let's say Ezra or Yeshaya, Yirmiyah, was told to go and insert a posuk in the Torah, is that person a heretic or not? So according to this, it sounds like you are. The whole Torah we have in our hands is from Moshe Rabbeinu. So the Rambam, in his own understanding, would consider that person to be wrong and a heretic. But he doesn't paskin that in his Mishnah Torah because he recognizes that there's ambiguity in the Gemara about it. And he's not going to paskin someone as a heretic if there's ambiguity in the Gemara. So he'd certainly say that person was right. I think he argued with Ibn Ezra on this, assuming Ibn Ezra said that, and that's a whole discussion. He said, because he writes in a very sort of cryptic way. But in his Mishnah Torah, he wouldn't put that person down as a heretic. But in general, the Rambam is probably the strictest. It's probably the strictest opinion we have among the Rishonim about this. I don't think we find any of the other Rishonim saying that you have to believe every single word of the Torah came from Moshe, nothing was changed, otherwise you're a heretic. It may say you're wrong, but and they said that Rambam was particularly emphasizing this. Again, this is another take it or leave it. That the Muslims in a time had this whole anti-Semitic libel about how the Jews had forged parts of the Torah, and therefore the Rambam was being particularly strong against this. No, we believe that everything in the Torah comes from Hashem, every word, there's no forgery. There's a thing the Muslims do now, I think they have the Akedah Shmuel.
Right,
They say that it was Shmuel that was in the Akedah, and the Jews forged the Torah to make it into Yitzchak. They have to forge the other parts of the Torah as well to make it fit, but aside from the point. So because this heresy was going on, it was very damaging. I don't think the Christians ever did that. So the Christians said that the Torah they would supersede whatever it was, but they never accused us of actually forging things.
I mean, they themselves, the translations, they changed some things.
Right. They did other things, but they never actually accused us of forgery. So that, again, the Rambam comes down very, very firmly on this, and he goes through saying that there's no difference in the level of kedusha between the pasuk Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad and seemingly less important psukim like listing genealogies and like that. It's all the same level of nevuah from Moshe rabeinu, from Hashem. And there's no room for debate, no room for discussion. He goes not just the words of the Torah, also the Pirush Torah Makubal. This is something he talks about in the beginning of his Pirush Mishnayos, that every mitzvah that Moshe communicated to us in the Midbar was not just the words that we have in the Sefer Torah, but it came the Perusha. Every mitzvah came with an explanation. So he didn't just say, go and wear tefillin. It was made clear to people at the time what tefillin are. Because, it was made clear to everyone, as he goes to say, the tavnis of tefillin, the tavnis of sukkah. Because giving a commandment to take arba minim and wave them around, or to wear tzitzis, or to do shechita, not have any explanation of what this involves, it's not really much of a commandment. So the Rambam, he brings the psukim there in the introduction to the Mishnah, that all of that is part of this Yesod also. Not just the written text of the Torah, but also the basic structure of every mitzvah. That could never be disputed, it could never be a machlokas over it. Again, this is the Talmud Reclaim book that I go into. There's basically two tiers within every mitzvah within Torah Shabbal Peh. You've got the written text of the Torah, and then within the Torah Shabbal Peh, you've got the fixed perush that's come down undisputed all the way from Moshe rabeinu, and the things in the Gemara which are beyond dispute, show examples of it. And then there are the finer details which were given over to the Sanhedrin, the Chazal Vayat, the Sanhedrin of every generation to legislate, and they could revisit them and change them. And again, that's all my Talmud book. But the basic tavnis, he says, the basic structure of the mitzvah, without which the mitzvah doesn't make any sense, go and dwell in a sukkah. What's a sukkah? I don't know. It just says sukkah. So without knowing a basic idea of what a sukkah is, the commandment's just nonsensical. So the basic structure, every mitzvah that's required, that was certainly said over to Moshe, and that's why you don't find generally any debate and dispute in the Gemara about the basic structure of every mitzvah. And if you do seem to, then you have to question what's the basic structure of that mitzvah. Again, but plenty of discussion that Talmud Reclaim only wants to see.
Would you also say that every letter, the way how everything is written, is exactly from Moshe Rabbeinu? Because we know that over history, maybe even nowadays, although nowadays I think not so much, but at least in history, we had different communities had slight variations. But usually
questions. The impression from the Rambam seems to be yes, but it's very hard to take him at face value on that, which is why people say he's coming along and making a stand against what the Muslims are. First of all, no other Christians goes this far, and if you look at the context, he was pushing back very hard against these anti-Semitic pogroms and the justifications, and so taking absolute stand. No, we don't give any ground with it. Everything's exactly how it was.
I mean, the differences that existed were like very, very minor. Like usually, like if it's
alaf and a hey,
alaf hey, or like with a vav or without, like, but none of the meaning, or at least the plain meaning, would have changed at all. So like really, it's the same Torah. Like,
so again, he's very, very forceful about it here. Sorry, I can see the argument both ways. But we'll finish off the last few quickly. Oh, the next one's actually interesting. Going to hetek. You said a shi'i. Torah's Moshe Zos Matekas Meitz Haboris Barach Lo Mizulosai Allow Il Haisif Mimena in the Gra. There's going to be no. This is the Torah which God gave us. It's nothing. You can't add anything to it. You can't take anything away from it. This is the fixed part of the Torah Shabbat Peh. Shanei Malo Sosif Alav Lo Sigor Menu. You can't add or remove anything from it. And he said, which is the introduction to Perish Mishnayos. That's basically all about this: what can be added, what can't be added, what the process is. And again, that's the basis for my Talmud Reclaim book. And one very interesting thing here, that this it actually is a matter of debate between Rambam and other Rishonim about whether the Torah can change Moshe Mashiach. Rambam and certain others say no. Lo soisiv lo ligra means Torah can never change. Again, details of halachas can change once there's a Sanhedrin again, but being mevatel mitzvahs completely, adding new mitzvahs, that can never happen ever. Whereas I think other Rishonim, possibly based on the Zohar, say that whole thing is only said during the regular time, and Moshe Mashiach has a different sort of existence altogether, and therefore these psukim don't apply. And that also, what I read, has led to some difference in terms of Shabtai Tzvi. When he came along and was trying to claim you can mevatel certain mitzvahs, the more Sephardic communities that were following the Rambam kicked him straight out. What he's saying is untenable. If a Novi comes along and tries to change a mitzvah, he gets put to death. So when he was in, I think it was Turkey and Syria, the communities there were much more Rambam oriented, and they kicked him out. Whereas when he made his claims in other parts of Europe, who followed other Rishonim more, he found more of an opening ear for his claims. So it's a historical. And the final three sodos, 4, 10, 11, 12, 13 are things we've really dealt with. So that's the topic to go back listen to the earlier shiurim. It's basically the idea of reward and punishment. What is a reward and punishment? What is olam haba? What is Moshe Mashiach? What is Tekias HaMesim? These are things that we dealt with really in a lot of detail in the earlier shiurim in this series. So if anyone's listening just to this part, I'd tell you to go and dig up the earlier shiurim in this series. Thank you all very, very much. I've enjoyed this a lot.
I'm sorry, did I miss any discussion on Ruach HaKodesh? Or you didn't touch it?
Not really. Ruach HaKodesh doesn't seem to be an Ikar Emunah. Meaning we believe that it's true, but the Ikar Emunah is Nevuah, the fact that it can get a communication. Yeah. You could argue that Ruach HaKodesh, he does basically say that in the Moreh Nevuchim, and he says there are 13 different levels of Nevuah, the first 2 or 3 are called Ruach HaKodesh. So it could be, you could say Ruach HaKodesh is included in that, but I think it's more his basic idea is the fact that there's communication between God and humans. That's really the thing we have to believe. And that Moshe Rabeinu is on a unique level. Those are the...
Okay, Yishar Koach, thank you so much.